you arrive to this place that you knew you were meant to be in when you were standing on the paddleboard all that time ago. In all of that stuff happened in between. What was that moment like when you arrived?
It was an achievement. We definitely all felt a sense of achievement. I think, we had the last 2 days on the boat before we reached the port of Brisbane were indicative of that. I think there was no wind the day before, right? So it was a very calm day, and I'll remember it forever because all of us were on the front of the boat. And that's not what you do when you're at sea. You're not really supposed to leave the cockpit, but it was so calm that, it was very safe. So we all did. And it was just this beautiful day, bright blue sky, very calm, and just this peaceful energy. And we had a day to go, but we were basically there. And that we all knew it and we all felt it. And there was this great sense of connection between us. I have great photos of it in the book of Jack and Ellie. Jack has his arm around Ellie and they're talking and giggling and just so happy. And Grant's sitting there on one of the hulls with his beard down to his.
Oh, really? Is there a photo in there?
Yeah.
Oh,
he's got the full David Letterman going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And this moment, I just, that moment for me really registered. I felt into it and I was in tears because I cannot believe that I could never have imagined the impact and the transformation that was going to take place back on that paddleboard when all that came through. Like I went, well, that was really for a reason. And again, I'm getting goosebumps.
Yeah, I've got them
because it was just and it's what compelled me to write the book because it truly was a transformational experience for every single one of us, for us as a family. And what these young people came out with is a gift of a lifetime. They can do anything.
And so amazing that because they were feeling the disconnection, you describe this in the book, and this is the first part of the book where it's just your whole lives, how you met. It's such a wonderful read. It gives amazing context. But, there's two gorgeous kids and they're just anxious, depressed, and awesome parents, but the world shut down. They're online learning. It's a horrible place to be as a child when you want to be out connecting. So to take them on this trip as
yeah. And what have you witnessed in your children since that experience that upon reflection, if, you stood in a sliding doors moment, what have you noticed?
Oh, it was like the door they went through was a different reality. It was a parallel universe and it was their higher timeline, I would say for sure. They are incredible human beings. They're so connected. They're so conscious. They're so aware. The levels of awareness are unbelievable and their levels of empathy are also unbelievable. And they're so loving for each other. They love each other. They love other people and they want really good things for the world. They're able to think outside of themselves where, a lot of teenagers struggle with that. That's a natural state of being for teenagers to be, within themselves. But these kids are so outside of themselves so often and they just they are the change you want to see. There's a chapter about that in the end. And, they come out to us on our last night in Bora Bora on the boat as non-binary and queer. And while we already knew some of those things, the way they did that, and it was awe-inspiring. I'm tearing up because you want your children to know themselves that deeply at that point, and you want them to feel safe and you want them to be able to live their truth. And these kids have done that, and it wasn't easy, and it's still not easy. You would hope that things were easier for the LGBT community in this day and age, and it's still not easy. And for them to pave the way is a really brave, beautiful thing. And so I could not be prouder of them than I am.
That's beautiful. I can't wrap my head around why it's not easy for everyone just to accept everyone. I find it really difficult to comprehend. So that's really beautiful to hear that they were so knowing of who they are, that they were confident to speak to you guys about their truth.
And I'd like to ask Jack a question because he's in the room. Every time someone gets emotional, I wanted to ask you, what did your parents give you to feel that level of confidence, and to be able to live your truth in a world that will be very crushing of people who say, I am living my truth and it might be different to yours. What's the question? Yeah. So what gave you strength to?
I think they set examples themselves. They aren't afraid to be who they are, and it's very easy to observe that. And they gave us freedom and trust and just a lot of love. So I don't know. I think for me personally, if I knew how I identified earlier, I wouldn't have hesitated to tell them, because there's always been immense love and trust, but it was more just the timing that led Ellie and I, my sibling, to come out to them in that moment.
And do you think being away from peers, let me say,
Yes.
not that they're really peers often, but being able to separate from that helped
Yes.
that process?
For sure. I always struggled to be my own person when we were in school, when I started high school, and then that disconnection when we moved, I had no choice but to be with myself and then my family as well. So it really helped me find myself.
That's very cool. Thank you for sharing that.
Thanks. And what advice would you give to people like yourself who are in conflict and what they want to tell, they want to talk, they want to be supported? What advice would you give them?
Famous words from my dad, just beat to your own drum. Don't worry about what other people are thinking of you. It's the last thing you should be worried about. Just do your best to do what makes you happy and be what makes you happy.
And I think it's okay not to know. I mean, I had
course,
so many years of not knowing what I wanted to be, what I wanted to contribute in life. And it caused me a lot of anxiety and angst because I felt like a failure, just not knowing. But I think it must have been such a confusing time for you because you didn't fit in any kind of society box or mold or whatever.
Nor did I want to.
Exactly. And that's so confusing because you're navigating a whole new space, which is beautiful. We need that. So yeah, that's, it's okay not to know and to find.
Of course.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thanks,
It's okay
Aisha.
to change your mind too.
Yeah.
That's it. And all these things are fluid,
Yeah.
as it should be. And that's what these kids are here to teach us and to show us that
Yeah.
we put too many labels on too many things and we limit ourselves. And that's just not how we're meant to be.
And I remember being a teenager and every afternoon I'd change my identity as far as I'd see Eddie Murphy and be like, I want to be like him. And then I'd see Mel Gibson like, I want to be like you. You would just chop and change it. It was all a part of trying lots of things on, and he didn't want anyone saying, no, you can't do that. It's like, the build up to the trip. Like, so you have this beautiful house, you both got careers, and drop everything. Well, just pack up everything, massive bus, travel around the US, then let's go to Australia, back to Australia.
So there was Mexico. I want to give the listeners a bird's eye view of everything here.
Yeah.
So then was Mexico?
It was 8 months around the States and 3 months in Mexico. No, excuse me. 8 months on the bus altogether. 3 of those months were spent in Mexico.
So how did we kind of just jumped straight to the boat. So how did that transpire? What sort of boat and where did you leave from and what was the intention when you got on the boat?
So we were in Mexico doing some mountain biking trails. We bumped into these people and they'd been on a catamaran and they'd migrated onto an RV. And they said if we were going to do it again, we'd do it the other way. And I'm like, well, we're already in the RV, right? I'm like, wouldn't that be cool? Go onto a boat. And I think that planted the seed. But ultimately, we were looking at the whole COVID lockdown and everything that was happening in Australia, and we could not fly back into Australia. And I learned that in actual fact, a sailing boat would have to be accepted in the port. That was just a rule of the sea. So if we sailed back into Australia, we could get back into Australia.
Very clever.
And so that sort of started this whole process of, well, if we were going to do that, what would we buy? And so my thought was at least a 40-foot, but probably a 48-foot catamaran would be ideal. And, we'd had a lot of experience sailing them in coastal waters around the islands, that sort of stuff. But as I looked at boats and the prices of boats were going through the roof, price of RVs, everything was just skyrocketing.
Yeah.
I'm looking everywhere and I'm trying to buy a boat out of Asia. I'm trying to buy a boat out of the, South Pacific and or the West Coast and all these, and Hawaii. I looked everywhere and we finally found a boat, cheapest boat you can imagine, 38 feet. So way under what I'd imagined would be the minimal viable product. and we bought it pretty much sight unseen. We did have a survey done and the survey said, look, it's structurally fine, but there was a lot, you could read between the lines. There was a lot of stuff that needed to be done. I thought, we can handle that, right? So
there was a stack of stuff while you were in town, yeah.
We flew over, Jack and I flew over first, and Yana and Stella stayed for a week in Saddle, which I was so grateful for, because when we got on that boat, I almost burst into tears because it was a wreck. And Jack and I are sort of looking at each other, and I'm sure, Jack's in the room here with us right now, and I can feel him right now because I can only imagine what was going through his mind, but he gave me his trust. And so for the next week, we just worked around the clock, just clearing the junk off this boat, getting it to a point where when Yana jumped on board, she didn't burst into tears, but again, probably almost did. Because
I didn't. Ellie was not.
Stelly was, was definitely not happy. But anyway, so we got on the boat in Tahiti. And what we thought would be maybe 3 weeks, a week to 3 weeks of repairs was 3 months of, really solid work. I mean, pulled the boat out of the water and
in that time, all the ports in the South Pacific shut down because Delta spread. Everything was open and, everything's shut down. So suddenly we're going, what do we do? How do we do this now?
So hang on, you flew to Tahiti?
Yes.
At this point, okay.
Picked up the boat there.
Right.
And the theory was we'd island hop. Like what I'd sold Yana on was, it's only like 2, 3, 4 day trips max, like just little hops. But it turned into a 15-day grueling hike across to Fiji, Fiji was the first port that opened up in the South Pacific at that time. And we were sort of literally up in Bora Bora, literally waiting for something to open up. And then we went.
What a terrible place to be stuck.
Oh, it was unbelievable. Unreal.
But it all sounds very glamorous. Like, Tahiti, darling, then we'll go to Bora Bora. But it wasn't like that at all, was
really,
it?
wow.
No. Describe like some of the things you had to go through. And imagine a 38-foot.
So it was no Insta, what did they call it? The highlight reel?
No. No.
Well, just the boat in and of itself, the physical boat in and of itself, there was nothing that I didn't turn a spanner on. There was nothing that actually functioned properly or wholly. And even the trampoline, I'd ordered a new trampoline from France for the boat. It was shipped and got lost in transit and just went round the world for 6 months, never arrived. And so Jack and I literally knitting the trampoline together with rope, like to just keep it together. And at one point, in the middle of the ocean, I went through the trampoline, was, through it completely and hanging onto the jib. What was left of the jib which was in tatters because we're in the middle of this squall and there's and all this stuff. And simply based on the fact that the boat was not in ideal condition. So we went through a lot. But I could honestly say by the end of it, I knew that boat intimately and there was nothing, we couldn't resolve if we had to at sea. But even just getting our gear, so we shipped all our gear to Samoa with the thought that we couldn't get it into Tahiti at the time, and there was all sorts of freight issues, and ships weren't sailing, and so there was a ship going to Samoa, so we shipped it to Samoa. We said, it's 7-8 day trip to Samoa, and then Samoa locked down, and so all our staff, which included safety gear, water maker, all sorts of stuff we needed for the trip, was unavailable to us. We couldn't access Samoa, and so it was a sequence of things that truly challenged us logistically, but challenged, our ability to trust and surrender again. And I looked at those things. I'm thinking, are these red lights from the universe? Are these what are they? I'm trying to understand. And I came to learn later that they were really just literally taking us to that point of absolute capitulation. Yeah, we just go, okay, I give in. I give in. Here we are.
Yeah, that's really, I feel like there was a calling put out there to really elevate and move beyond the fear and move beyond all of these sort of lower
frequency.
frequencies,
lower,
and elevate above that. And in order to do that, you get thrown into you call it a very acute experience, and you seem to have really, done the fire walk and got to the other side and, on a high, I guess, really, to have ticked all the boxes that you wanted to tick and overcome all of the lower frequency emotions that were hanging around.
I think that firewalk you described there, somewhere, is just really spot on. I mean, why do people do that? It's really to challenge yourself, to take yourself beyond or out of, what we would call our normal bodily experiences. And that would probably be a really great way to think about this. This is our firewalk, but it was, it took a year.
Yeah, it's a long one.
Yeah.
It's a long time to burn your feet.
But you've got all these great gems in your book, and one that you said very quickly, we realized that minimizing did not actually mean compromising. And I thought, I love that one.
I love it.
And starting in our mind, minimizing. So just trying to quiet the thinking as much as you can, but to actually take away all of this. What did you find when you started to travel? Did you find that intuitive ability increased?